जैसे भी
Okay, it's live now.
Hello, hello everyone. Today we are on this candid discussion with author Chandrachud Ghosh, who has written his new book. Government doesn't want you to know this. The book will be available on Bethesda and Amazon tonight. So let's start with the first question, and then Kanishk, the editor of Booklink, will take over. After writing Conundrum, this book, yes. Please tell us a little bit about your journey, about your latest one.
See, Conundrum was received very well throughout the country and in other countries as well. In all countries where Indians live in large numbers, it was received very, very well, because it's a book which has been meticulously researched, and we have put together all the documents for over 10, 15 years. And nobody had that kind of collection of documents and facts to weave the story which had been missing from the public domain. We did it for the first time. But there was one downside of the book, is that the case, this whole issue of Netaji's disappearance and his coming back to his return to India, that whole issue is so complicated. The matter itself is so complex that it's difficult to grasp at one go, because there are so many characters. It is spread over a period of 7.5 decades, and governments, different political parties, the power plays, other countries, other governments. It's very, very complex. In fact, we got the feedback from many of our readers that they had to sit down with a notebook and a pen and make notes while they kept reading the book, to be able to grasp the complexity of the book. So it was published in 2019, and after that, certain events also took place, certain incidents took place, and some new developments were also there. And one of the critical pieces in that book was dealing with the DNA test of the teeth of the so-called Gumnami Baba, and where the government, the official labs had given their verdict that the DNA of Gumnami Baba's teeth don't match with Netaji's family members. So that is very important from a layman's perspective, because for all of us, if DNA doesn't match, then the two persons have to be different. That's in black and white. But then there is politics behind that also. There is a politics of science also. And so we had to dig deep into that when we demonstrated in Conundrum how the whole testing and everything results were fudged. But after the book was released, we got in touch with more experts. We learned more, gathered more information. So we have done two things with the new book. First is we have simplified the narrative, told the story in a different style, so that it becomes accessible to a larger number of people who are not so deeply interested, or not don't have that kind of time to read through such a fat, thick book, even if they are interested. So we have brought it down to a much lighter volume, and we have considerably updated with whatever has happened after publication of Conundrum. And obviously, there was a movie after we published the book. A movie was produced based on our work, and that has created much more awareness, much more consciousness among people, and they want to know more, they want to read more. But the style of Conundrum was more rigorous, academic, and difficult to comprehend for many people. So we have tried to break down the complexities, make it much simpler, retaining the essential facts and essential elements of the main story, and updating it, making it completely up to date. So that's in short the reason for writing this book, and the story of the time between Conundrum and the new book.
Okay. Chandrachud, coming to your next book, the latest one, Government Doesn't Want You to Know This. My question is, if there would have been a Congress government, the reasons would have been obvious why the government does not want to know this. But why would a BJP government hesitate from all these facts?
Actually, Kanishk, we have done a separate chapter on this particular matter, because it's a question. There are 2-3 obvious questions that anybody who comes across the matter, they ask at the very beginning. First is, why, if he was Subhash Chandra Bose, then why didn't he come out? That's something that we have dealt with in much detail. Then there is this question that we can understand that the Congress didn't do it, but why is the BJP not doing it? There are many. I mean, the answer for that, to find the answer, we have to really go back to the era of independence from 45 to 47, and then as the first Indian government in Free India started off, the overwhelming narrative was built at that time. So, for instance, a couple of weeks back, a leading intellectual of the BJP wrote one article in Times of India and laid it down, saying that India's defining icon is Mahatma Gandhi. So we didn't really understand what a defining icon, how can Mahatma Gandhi be defining icon of India? Because whatever modern India is doing, particularly under the India government, is completely against the idea of Gandhianism. But that's a narrative that has been built, that we got our freedom, we got our independence through ahimsa, through friendliness, feelings of friendliness, a lot of fellow feeling, that we sat on the road and pleaded with the British government, and we asked them to leave, and then they were very considerate and very sympathetic towards us and said, okay, brother, you have spent many years under our rule, so we think it's time for us to go. We will leave you to yourselves. So a very nice feeling, a very touchy-feely kind of narrative has been built right from the time of independence, that we got our independence through Mahatma Gandhi. I mean, this is, I will refer to one very pithy statement which Anuj frequently makes, that through ahimsa you cannot evict a tenant, and you're talking about overthrowing a colonial empire by ahimsa. I mean, how ridiculous, how absurd that can be. So we all know, and whoever has studied Indian history, they know, and unfortunately it was not made the official story, it was not made part of the official narrative, that the Britishers were forced to leave. Of course, independence would have come, but the question is whether independence would have come in 1947. Probably not. But what happened is, when the INA soldiers were brought back, when 3 of the INA soldiers were put up for trial on the Red Fort in towards the end of 1945, the whole country burst out in protest. These were spontaneous protests. These were not organized by the Congress. The spirit of rebellion, it spread throughout the country, and it affected the military establishments. The British government, the British nation, the UK, the United Kingdom, had held on to India on the basis of their hold on the military, on the army, on the navy, on the air force. But now the things were all unraveling. There was a Royal Indian Navy mutiny which defied the government. The Congress wanted to suppress that rising rather than supporting them. So very surprisingly, whenever post 1945, we see whenever there was a rising, the Congress leaders were extremely keen to put them down, not to raise any movement, because they knew that they couldn't control the movement anymore. Those wouldn't be non-violent, controlled Gandhian experiments, because these were spontaneous public uprisings. And when the INA trials were going on, to their horror, the Britishers realized that the British Indian soldiers, Indians in the British Indian Army, I refuse to call it the Indian Army, because it was not an Indian army, it was the British Army, where Indians were mercenaries. To their horror, the government discovered through intelligence notes, those intelligence notes are still available at the National Archives, that Indian soldiers were raising money in the cantonments, wherever they were posted, and sending to the families of the INA soldiers for taking care of them. There was so much sympathy, and they realized that they had largely lost control over the army. And if they had lost control over the army, there was no way they were going to hold down on this land. They were going to control this country. There was no way they could do it. And on top of that, there was, of course, there were other factors too. That was not the only factor, but that was the most important factor leading them to decide. There were other factors like economic factors were there. Britain was badly beaten down by the World War. There was pressure from the Americans. The Americans were pressurizing UK for declaring India's independence. All those factors were there, but those are issues which they could have negotiated. This matter could have dragged on for many, many more years. There was no reason for them to declare independence in 1947. The whole thing was catalyzed, it was accelerated because the British realized that they could not hold on to India anymore with the help of military. And that is where Netaji's contribution is the maximum in accelerating our independence. It's not that India would never have been free. India would have been free, but many, many years later. And I mean, there were earlier talks that probably India, they will start discussing India's independence probably in the 1940s, 1950s and 1960s. It would have gone on, because we see that even after the British left, technically they left with India as a dominion, but then the army was headed by a Britisher, the navy was headed by a Britisher, the air force was headed by a Britisher, the intelligence bureau, which was Indian government's agency, it was directly reporting to the MI5 regularly till 1968. So all these connections were there. And that's the narrative. That's the narrative, that good feeling that the British are our brothers and they left because, well, we have no ill feeling towards the British. I mean, we are talking about history. In the current world, we are all equals and there is no ill feeling. But at that time, there was ahimsa was not really the reason that left, but that that made the British leave. But it has helped those who were in power to keep their contact, their network with the colonial masters, and help them to keep control of the country's power. And that narrative has been very important for them. You will see a lot of bureaucrats. It has like become a family trade. I mean, bureaucrats' son or daughter becomes bureaucrat. Army generals, their children get into the army. So that tradition, and in that role, this ahimsa thing has become very important. So that's another reason why this Gandhian myth has been maintained for so long. And if honestly, if any government acknowledges Netaji's role, then this Gandhian myth will topple over. And as we realized that in India, there is only one political party which places Gandhi as the ideologue in its party constitution. Now, party constitution is a very important thing. For example, the communists put Marx and Lenin in their party constitution as the source of their ideology. Similarly, there is only one political party in India which I asked this question, asked people, what do you think? Which party is it? Most people thought it was
BJP,
Congress,
Gandhi.
but it's not BJP. So obviously, I mean, they don't want anything to disturb that myth, that narrative. And that is the reason why BJP is probably not going ahead. I would be happy to be proven wrong, but till now, nothing has happened that can prove me wrong.
Your screen is frozen.
Kanishk's screen is frozen.
Yes, yes.
Kanishk, probably you will have to log out and log in.
Yes, hold on for a sec, sir. Okay, so let me now. There was this question you have told us about the Indian Army and quite a few facts. Now, the next question that I would be asking you is, what are these things that the government doesn't want the general masses to know? Can you tell us a few points from the book?
The first thing is that the government doesn't want people of India to know about the true fate of Netaji. What happened to him? What happened to Netaji? No government is ready to tell the full truth. And obviously, Congress was never ready to do that. But then what the Congress did by rejecting the report of the Justice Mukherjee Commission of Inquiry, which had found out, which had concluded that Netaji did not die in the 1945 plane crash. The Congress had rejected that report, that finding. Surprisingly, the BJP has, when it was in opposition, it had opposed Congress on that point. They had asked the Congress to accept the Mukherjee Commission report. But when that same party came to power in 2014, they have continued with the Congress policy, and they have publicly acknowledged, publicly informed us that they continue with the Congress parties, the Congress government's, Manmohan Singh government's decision that Netaji died in 1945. So if that is the case, then obviously the government, and by government, when we say government in the cover of the book, it's not this BJP government alone. It is all the party governments, that the successive governments that we have had from 1947 onwards, all the governments. No government want the people of India to know the full truth. And that is what we have shown definitely, because it's very clear that the government doesn't want us to know the truth by the mere fact that all files have not been declassified yet. The government keeps claiming and misleading the people, and most horribly misleading the parliament by repeatedly claiming that all files have been declassified. We know for a fact that intelligence files have not been declassified. Not a single intelligence file have been declassified. And there are many more files, the existence of which are indicated by the files which have been declassified till now. And raising questions with the government doesn't help. They just ignore, and they don't want to talk about it. So that is what, I mean, the attitude is very, very clear that the government doesn't want to take it up. The government doesn't want people to talk about it, and that the government doesn't want the people of this country to know the full truth. That is what the government doesn't want us to know. That's why we title this book in this manner.
Hello, is Kanishk back with us? No, I don't think so.
Yes.
Oh, he is. No, yeah.
Okay.
You go on.
I heard the answers, Chanchulji, and I would like to ask you that government said on the floor of the parliament that they have classified all the files related to Netaji. So was that wrong?
Yes, that's an absolute lie. They have not declassified all files. That's what I said, that they have not. See, what happened, one thing, there are two things that I would like to point out here. A declassification is a systematic process. It is not done on the matter of whims and fancies of any particular person or any political party. So before a declassification is done, transparency demands that you tell the people that we have so many number of files. We have 100, 200, 300, 400 files. Before declassification, the BJP government never made it clear what are the exact number of files that they are holding. That number was never given out. They started all of a sudden, they ended all of a sudden. But the exact number of files were never given out. Now, interestingly, we have been asking this question to the government from around 2007-8, that how many classified files do you have on Netaji, and how many files that you have which are not classified? So normal files and classified files put together, what is the number? We used to get answer which used to tell us numbers in the range of 30 to 40, at the most 50. Now, if that was the truth, then where did these 300 files come from? It doesn't come overnight. It doesn't happen overnight. I mean, 30, 40, 50 files, 60 files cannot become 300 files overnight. So that means the government was giving us wrong information under the Right to Information Act. Till then, that was the UPA government. And when the BJP government came to power and declassified all these files, they never said it beforehand. They did not do an audit to find out what exactly are the number of files. They never made it public. They started the process and ended the process, just like that. And secondly, the second point is the intelligence files. They just don't talk about it as if they don't exist. They say that we have declassified all files. Then what are the intelligence files? Sorry?
the files with the IB?
With IB, with RAW, there are state government CID branches which have files. Definitely, they have files. Like the West Bengal government declassified 64 files, and we can say that they have a few more files. They have not declassified everything. So all those files, where are they? Intelligence Bureau, R&AW, are not foreign organizations. They are Government of India organizations. So how can the government say that we have declassified everything? They have not. That's a completely wrong statement.
Okay. Government also said that it would affect bilateral relations with other countries. Are these apprehensions true?
No, that's a bit funny part. Like when I had asked for the files related to Netaji's marriage, they told me that it will spoil relations with foreign countries. So I tried to figure out which are the foreign countries that were involved in Netaji's marriage. At that time, it was Germany, Nazi Germany, which doesn't exist anymore. So there is no question of anybody getting angry. And marriage or no marriage, it was Netaji's personal matter. Why would a foreign government be at all bothered about it? And it is these are files about our icon, and these are files that are held by our government. It belongs to our country's history. Where is the question of any foreign government getting annoyed or upset about it? And even if they do, how does it matter? Why would you, just because some other country would get upset, would you stop talking about our icons? Is it even a decent argument? That, when there were these talks of allegations about homosexuality regarding Gandhiji, and there were letters put up on auction, the government went all out of its way to buy those letters, spending millions of dollars. That time they didn't bother that other governments might get angry. When Gandhiji's glasses, spectacles are put on auction, the government spends millions of dollars to buy it. They don't care whether anybody is getting angry or not. Why this lame excuse? And the very excuse is lame, is proven by the fact now 300 files have been declassified. Has a single foreign government raised any objection? Or are you telling me that they have not raised objection, which means that you have not declassified all files? Then where are the files which would annoy or upset other governments, foreign governments? So either it's a lame excuse, a complete lie, or you are just hiding more files. One of these have to be true.
The Nazi Germany does not exist. The erstwhile Soviet Union does not exist. So there is no question of these things being any
Imperial Japan
kind of. Yes, Imperial Japan does not exist.
So who is going to get angry? Are Lenin and Stalin going to turn in their graves? Is that the worry?
Tough to buy this argument.
So that's the truth. That's the reality.
So where do you see this going now that the government has said this on the floor of the parliament? So we have to buy it. There is no other option. I think what else can one do? Are you planning to approach the court?
It's not necessary that we have to buy it. The government says many things which we don't accept, which we protest against. And what we are doing is we are raising mass awareness, we are raising mass consciousness, and whatever the government says, the majority of the country believes that the government is not telling the truth. And that because, we are very active online and offline, we do interact with a large number of people regularly, on a regular basis. We know there is a tremendous response to the work that we are doing, and there is a tremendous level of support that we get. And people are genuinely keen to know the truth. They want the government to tell the truth. They are ready for it. It's the government's problem as to why it is not doing so. So we will make every effort that what we have found out, and what we have found out is not mere conjecture. It is based on hard facts. It is based on forensic evidence. We will make every effort for the government to accept and come out with the truth.
Netaji was alive and he lived in India for so many years. As earlier, the Concordat actually establishes this fact that Gumnami Baba was Netaji. Almost it was established. So why did he not appear in front of everyone? Why he went into hiding?
Well, there is no single answer to this question. There is no it is not a multiple choice question. There is no single answer, no single correct answer. There were various factors which held him back. And the first thing was that he was absolutely devastated by the partition of the country, and particularly the way refugees from East Bengal were treated, particularly the women, the way they were treated, maltreated, the way they were tortured, butchered, raped, and it broke his heart. And I mean, it's difficult for us to imagine that what an impact the partition would have had on a person like him. But when we read the narratives, when we read the journals and the notes that were taken by his followers, we get a fair amount of idea how hard it hit him. So that was one of the reasons that he was completely devastated and disillusioned. Then, if you look at the 1950s, the political scenario in the country in the 1950s or mid-50s even, see, if Subhash Bose came back at the end of 1945, it would have been very different. He would have been received with such hero worship that he would have swept off all other political parties and personalities, all other leaders. There would be no challenge in front of him. But Subhash Bose coming back in 1955-56 would be very different. Most of the challengers to Nehru were either dead or were subdued. And if you look at the alternatives, the Communist Party, the Socialist Party, they had at one time, even during the Second World War, tremendously opposed him, used derogatory language against him, and were ideologically completely against him.
Communist Party published a cartoon along with General Tuzu in a very derogatory way, depicting Subhash Bose as a dog in their mouthpiece.
Yes, they published many similar cartoons, many, not one, many cartoons like that, where he was shown as a dictator, as a stooge of the Japanese, and somebody who's going to ruin India. So they used all methods of propaganda that they have to build a negative image against Netaji and INA. That they did. And when Netaji left the country, that was a very, very disappointing experience for him. He was practically forced to leave the country because when he left Congress and he started campaigning with Forward Bloc, which he formed, initially he got the support of the leftists and the socialists, but gradually they turned against him. The Hindu Mahasabha turned against him. The Congress Party was already against him. There was a temporary alliance with the Muslim League, but even the Muslim League was trying to outsmart him, and they went against him. So the only people who stood behind were the groups of Bengal revolutionaries, and revolutionaries spread out in the country, and those people who had publicly come and joined Forward Bloc. And I mean, and it's very interesting that the same group of revolutionaries who had stood behind Subhash Bose were the same people who remained associated with the so-called Gumnami Baba till his end. And INA soldiers and those revolutionaries, the Anushilan Samiti, Jugantar, the revolutionaries from these groups, they were the very same persons who stayed in touch with him and helped him in every way. So that was another reason that he was disillusioned, and he was also very annoyed with the way that Indians, particularly Bengalis, reacted when he reached the northeast. When he entered Kohima, when he entered Imphal, there was no response from probably because not many people got to know, but he had sent messengers and his spies were working on the ground, but he didn't get any response from the other side. So that was another reason of his disappointment, but these were minor reasons. So, for example, now the major reasons would be that there are 2 or 3 major reasons. One example I will give you. I mean, a couple of years ago, there was this aid to an American Democratic senator, a Bengali fellow. And on one fine day, he wore a T-shirt in Washington during a press briefing or something. He wore a T-shirt which had Netaji's photo in front. And the whole US media went up in arms, saying that this Democratic senator's aide is a fan of a Nazi sympathizer, a Nazi follower. So this we are talking about in 2019. 2019, if 2019 we see that kind of reaction in a country which directly had nothing to do with Netaji, we can fairly imagine what the reaction would have been if he appeared in the 1950s or the 60s. I mean, that would have been. And Gumnam Baba, what he used to repeatedly say was that my coming out is not in the interest of the country. There will be civil war, there will be conflict with other countries, and India, being a nascent democracy, might not be able to withstand that kind of strife, that kind of violence. So it's better that I don't come out. That was one of the reasons. And then there were political manipulations which happened, that which gradually came out. We came to discover that actually there was a plan on part of the government that if he ever stepped out, he would be declared an imposter, and a dummy would be presented as a real person. So there was a plan like that, and he was aware of it. And to test the ground, to test the waters, what he did, he set up a dummy himself, actually, in a place in North Bengal called Sholmari. He set up an ashram and put a dummy there, another sadhu, whose name was Saradanand. His name was later known, Saradanand. But in 1962, there was a huge hue and cry that Saradanand was Netaji. And the real person sat back in Nimsar, Naimisharanya in Uttar Pradesh, and was watching the circus while it was going on in North Bengal and the whole of the country. The matters related to him reached the parliament, the Bengal Legislative Assembly, and there was a lot of commotion in Bengal throughout the state, but nothing happened and it fizzled out. So that's what, when people used to tell his followers used to tell him that if the people come to know that you have been treated such unfairly, they will rebel and there will be an eruption. He said, no, that's a wrong idea. People don't bother. I mean, they have lost the capacity to erupt in protest like that. There will nothing like that will happen, and that was his experiment to test the ground. And he saw it, what will happen. And he anticipated that if he came out and he would be declared an imposter, because he alleged that most of his family members were acquired by the Congress party through many pecuniary benefits, and they would testify against him, and in place of him another an actual imposter would be put in place. So all these reasons were there, and then he was worried that if I come out, there will be a tug of war. I mean, one party will want me as the leader, another party will want me as their leader, and I don't want to get into that kind of a situation. And even if they make me the head of the state, for example, they will grudge it for their lives, because politicians who are in their youth or just in their middle age, and they have their own ambitions, they will hold it as a grudge against me that they had to vacate the position for me, and that wouldn't be a nice thing to do. So these kind of situations he wanted to avoid. But these are all mostly, I mean, number of reasons. There was one prime reason why our guess, our understanding, why he couldn't come out, although he might have wanted to come out and at some points of time. And that was, he was suffering from some debility, some problems in his mind. And we spoke to a number of, we noticed a number of inconsistencies and certain patterns in his sayings and writings. And we consulted psychiatrists around the world, quite a few psychiatrists we spoke with. Most of them spoke on the condition of anonymity, so we couldn't use their name. But they did discuss it with us. And what we identified was that he was probably suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, which is very common for people who have spent their lives in that manner, in army, in conflict situations. And this man we are talking about has been in a situation of conflict right from his childhood. I mean, this is a man we're talking about who ran away from home at the age of 18, who was rusticated from college at the age of 19. He was he quit his ICS thing at the age of 24. He was sent to jail in the most horrible conditions at the age of 27, and he was exiled from his country. Sorry. So he was exiled from his country at the age of 35, and he had to stay away for 5 years. He came back, became the president, and then was because of the Gandhian wings petty politics, he had to give up at the age of 42. And then at the age of 44, he had to leave the country forever. Then he leaves the country in a most, I mean, it might sound very adventurous for us, but he left without any assistance, without any money, without any help, only with his self-confidence and with his brand image. He left. He went to Kabul, Peshawar, in the most difficult situations, crossed mountains barefoot, trudged through snow, was refused as entry by the Soviet Union, helped by Soviet Union, but then somehow reached Germany, set up a government there. The government was not ready to help. From there, he takes a submarine for 90 days, reaches Southeast Asia, sets up another government, raises another army, comes to Northeast India, fights out the battle, loses there, then Japan surrenders, and he has to escape. So if you look at this continuous sequence of events in his life, it is a roller coaster ride, and normal people like us probably wouldn't even survive halfway through. So, I mean, and then we don't know what happened when he reached Russia, Soviet Union. We don't know what happened. Probably he was tortured. There are indications that he was tortured for at least some time. At least initial period, probably he was tortured. He was imprisoned and tortured, at least for initial time. So if that is the case, then that would add to it. So he developed the PTSD syndrome, and he was aware of it. I mean, it's not the same as becoming mad. It's not becoming mad. His mental faculties were absolutely fine, and I mean, his mental standard was at the level of world statesmen. His analysis, his predictions, the way he used to talk, top of the world. But then this weakness remained, and probably he was ready to show his weakness to the country. That's probably the reason why he didn't come out.
Okay. Well, aptly put, Mr.
No, Kanishk, you go ahead. Please ask.
No, it's just a concluding remark. May we discover truth someday, sooner than later, and may you continue bringing these facets of history to our readers and followers. Wishing you all the very best with your latest.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And don't forget to grab your copy. It will be available on Vitasta and Amazon tonight. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Radhika.
Thank you, Mr. Ghosh. Thank you, Kanishk. Yeah. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.
You too.